So we're talking about the human evolution. So as we can see, human evolution is the evolutionary process that led to emergence of the anatomically modern humans, beginning with the evolutionary history of the primates, right? So in particular, we have the genus Homo. So the genus, if you search for the genus Homo, it means the fox. The genes that make the human, I think, is the fox something or like name the genes that human human have. So name the genes that human have. Or like we have a lot of genes. Like we can say like a Hox gene, so the Hox gene in human, right? So the Hox gene is a subset of the homobox genes, or a group of related genes that specifically region of the body plan of an embryo along the head tails axis of the animal. So we have the Hox gene, and the Hox gene is a gene in evolution, provides a huge amount of important information about evolution. The similarity of the genes is remarkable, and they are best explained by a descendant from a common ancestor. So what I think what had happened, it was that the science reached the place that scientists, they could not explain how like we become a human, and they like particularly and very much depend on the evolutionary theory. And they just by studying of the gene like the Hox gene, so they say yeah, we evolved. Like if we'll look at the wild pigs, right? So the wild pigs, so wild boar, they are California is a hog heaven for the wild pigs. California's wild pigs are descendant of the European wild boar, and introduced to Monterey County, California in 1920s, and domestic swine imported by European settlers in 1700s, and domestic swine forage fairly eventually becoming semi-wild or feral. Um, we can see, like we can ask the wild pigs involved from what? And domestic pigs are descended mainly from the wild boar, Sus scrofa, and the Sulawesi Valley pig, Sus galebensis, diverging from their closest ancestor about 5,000 years ago, according to Encyclopedia of the Life. Wild boar, so is a scrofa. So you say, what did the pig evolve from? The domestic pig originates from the Eurasian wild boar. We have sequenced the mitochondrial DNA, which is like located outside of the cell. Outside of the cell, like membrane or nucleus, is located in the cytoplasm of the cell. So the extracting of the mitochondria, it should be very easy. And nuclear genes from the wild and domestic pigs from the Asia and Europe, clear evidence was obtained for domestication to have occurred independently from a wild boar suspicion in Europe and Asia. So then let's talk about the wild boar, because in this picture it shows that the wild pigs, they evolved from the chimpanzees, right? Or very way back, but I don't know how like they got that. I try to see evidence from the molecular biology before Homo was the primates, divergence of the human clip from the other great apes. Yeah, Homo sapiens is the last one. Let's say habilis and Genesis. Uh, I think Australopithecus afarensis. Maybe we can refer to them because family tree showing the extent Homo onites, humans, genus Homo, chimpanzee and bonobos, gorillas, orangutan, and gibbon, the family of that Alexa gibbons that are homoid. Yeah. It say that the genetic evidence also employed resolve the question of whether there was any gene flow between early modern humans and Netherlands. It's really interesting. Like, more like a cross between a pig and a wolf, right? So the wolf, we say that they also like evolved from humans, right? So digestive tract, we said that the humans, they cannot digest cellulose, right? So let's say what like material or what food they contains cellulose, and we know the cellulose is the plant cell wall. So cellulose, paper products. Cellulose is the major constituent of the paper board and card stock. We have fibers. Cellulose is the main ingredient of the textile made from the cotton, linen, and the other plant fibers. It can be turned into rayon, an important fiber that has been used for textiles since the beginning of the 20th century. So I know that the plant cell wall is made of the cellulose, but our digestive tract cannot digest the cellulose, right? So we don't have the macrobiota. So cellulose is a straight chain insoluble polysaccharide that is composed of the glucose molecules linked by the beta 1,4, right? So the cellulose beta 1,4 glycosidic bonds. So 1,4 beta glycosidic bonds. It is the principal structure material of the plants, and as such is important abundant organic component in the world. It's also been found in certain sea squirts. Is cellulose harmful to humans? There are no known harmful side effects from adding it to the food, and it's completely legal. Cellulose is a non-digestive plant fiber, and we actually happen to need non-digestive vegetable fibers in our food, okay? That's why people eat like a bran flakes and psyllium husk, say Jeff Potter, out of the cooking for gigs. Fiber, what are the fibers? So the fibers, they are like the cereal, bran, beans, peas, right? So we eat all of those, right? Dietary like fiber. Why do we need to eat the fibers? And we can say what helps us to digest, like digest not the food but the cellulose or fibers in the gut. So more on the enzyme digestion in a later chapter. Undigestible cellulose is a fiber which aids in the smooth working of the intestinal tract. The symbiotic bacteria possess the necessary enzyme to digest cellulose in the gut tract. So we have the cellulose. Okay, so we can ask also what food contains cellulose. So what food contains cellulose? So although cellulose can be found in most plant matter, vegetarian people, the most economical source of the industrial cellulose are the wood pulp and the cotton. But our question specifically is what food that has cellulose. All plant foods such as fruits, vegetables, grains, rice, beans, nuts, and seeds contain cellulose. Yeah, I didn't know that because I was thinking the cellulose specifically as the plant cell wall, but like knowing that this food have a lot of cellulose is very interesting to see, right? So that's why the cellulose need more time for digestion in the gut, right? And we talked about the macrobiotic. So let's say what is the macrobiotic? So microbiota. Biota. The macroorganism of a particular site, habitat, or geological period. So what does macrobiotic mean? The microorganism that typically inhabit the particular environment, such as like macrobiotic, they inhabit the particular environment. It can be the soil, a body of the water, a site on or in an organism, considered as a group, also called the microbiome, right? So we have a macrobiotic digestion also. So how much bacteria is in the gut? Our gut microbiota contains tens of trillions of the microorganisms, including at least 1,000 different species of the known bacteria with more than 3 million genes, 150 times more than the human genes. And microbiota can in total weigh up to 2 kilograms. So that's very interesting to learn of those. I want to know the wolf, like how many genes wolves have, right? How many genes wolves have? Like in 2010, as a part of her doctoral research, Ron Hall had mapped the entire genome of 225 gray wolves and 912 dogs and from 85 breeds. There were a few genes that stood out as constantly different from dog and wolves, which we call a WBS gene, right? Or the gene we call WBS CR17. I really want to know wolf involved from like wolves involved from So here it says that wolf origin. The evolutionary history of the wolf is not totally clear, but many biologists believe that the wolf developed from primate carnivores such as miacid. The first gray wolf, right, Canis lupus, probably appeared in Eurasia, sometimes in the early Pleistocene period, about 1 million years ago. We can look at the evolution of wolf. Evolution of the wolf occurred over a geologic time scale of at least 300,000 years. The gray wolf, Canis lupus, is a highly adaptable species that is able to exist in a range of environments and which possesses a wide distribution across the Holarctic. Studies of modern gray wolves have identified distinct subpopulations that live in close proximity to each other. This variation in subpopulation is closely linked to differences in habitat, like perception, temperature, vegetation, and prey specialization, which affect the cranial-dental plasticity. The archaeological and paleontological records show gray wolf continuous present for at least the last 300,000 years. This continuous presence contrasts the genomic analysis, which suggests that all modern wolves and dogs descend from a common ancestral wolf population that existed as recently as 20,000 years ago. These analyses indicate the population bottleneck followed by rapid radiation from the ancestral population at a time during or just after the last glacial maximum. This implies that the original wolf population were outcompeted by a new type of the wolf which replaced them. However, the geographic origin of this radiation is not known. Yeah, it says that the wolf involved the Canis lupus. Or we can ask what involved from the wolf? What evolved from the wolves? Morphological evidence and genetic evidence both suggest that the wolves evolved during the Pleistocene and the early Pleistocene areas from the same lineage, and also led to coyote, with the fossil specimen indicating that coyote and the wolf diverged from a common ancestor 1.5 million years ago. Coyote. Okay. So let's talk about the gorillas. Get back to the saturated fats. Cows and goats have a four-gut structure, some bacterial structure, right? So we can know how many guts do cows have. So the cow has 4 stomachs and undergoes a special digestion process to break down the tough and coarse food it eats. When the cow first eats, it chews the food just enough to swallow it. The unchewed food travels to the first 2 stomachs, the rumen and the reticulum, and where it is stored later. So what animal has 7 stomachs? So I think when we say the 7 stomachs, we want to just draw out some guesses. So what could be my guesses? So first, I know that the body, so VWS is the wolf's gene, like the VWS something. So first thing that I want to note is, like, for example, we say the cows have 4 stomach, but so we can say the stomach size or number is proportional to animal size, I guess. So since the cows have 4 stomachs for digesting very well, the other ones, such as, so it asks which one has 7 stomachs. And I think maybe camel. Okay, and some animals have more than 1 stomach. Some actually have 4 stomachs. The whale does have a teeth, but it can't chew the food. So instead, the first part of the stomach have a very strong muscles. It crush the food to small pieces. So whales. So we can say whales. That makes sense. Have 7 stomachs. Which animal has 32 brain? Leeches have 32 brain. The surface of the leech's body can be divided into 1 or 2, but the internal structure is divided into 32 segments. Each of these 32 segments has its own segment of the brain. Every leech also has 2 productive organs and 9 pairs of the testes. Wow, 32 brain. Yeah, that's really fascinating. Okay, so cows, goats for a gut structure and bacterial structure they have. So contents are broken down by bacteria. Pigs have the low hind gut, right? So what is the low hind gut? So hind gut is anatomical terminology, or epigaster, like hind gut, or epigaster is the posterior part of alimentary canal. In mammals, includes the distal third of the transverse colon and the splendid flexure, the descending colon, sigmoid colon, and rectum. In zoology, the term hind gut also refers to the cecum and ascending colon. So we say hind gut basically is a colon and cecum, right? So the pigs have the low hind gut, higher percentage of the non-digestive. So wolf, they like the social creatures, and alloparenting. So we can ask what animals they are alloparenting. So first, what is alloparenting? So alloparenting means used to classify any form of the parental care provided by an individual towards a non-descendant young, right? So when say alloparenting, allo means together, parenting, so care toward other individuals. So we call them alloparenting because it occurs toward other individuals. The wolves, they are the social living creatures. They are alloparenting because they take care of each others. So they are no primates, and rather than wolves does that. So humans, they evolved from the wolves because the humans also, they like gathering, the social life. They like the alloparenting, so the parents take care of their kids, or the like the people that they do not have an ability to take care of themselves, right? So they are not primates, and rather than the wolves does the humans, they do hunting, they are doing gathering, right? So humans and wolves, they hang out and they become dogs. They are all happening by the natural selection. So we don't know how it happens. The wolves become humans, humans become dogs. We really don't know because it's not that much obvious to know it, but it's not that much obvious to know it, but of course we know that it all happened by the natural selection toward the evolution. Okay. And so let's talk about a little bit further than what we know about the book. So we talk about the cellulose. Let's think that the cellulose was also one of the factors caused the evolution in the environment. Let's just imagine we have the land and a lot of grasses that growing in that land, and in that area the only thing that we have is the grasses, like the plants, or we can say the fungi, because the fungi, they have the cell wall that made of the chitin. Okay, so it still is digestible, but it's not easy to digest. Okay, but let's say that we have only like the grasses, or we have fruit and vegetables, and we don't have anything else. So let's say we have some carnivorous in that area, and they cannot go to other area because let's say there is a land and they are surrounded all around by the water, and they cannot just move and go to some other place. They don't have any ability to fly, so they are kind of the trap. So if they are the carnivorous and they are located in an area that there is no access to the meat or other source that consider for the carnivorous, and they used to it. So let's say that they now what it happens, so they don't have that previous access, so they are kind of trapped. So but they are not going to die from the hunger. So they search for the other food sources in that area, and they try everything, and they see that the food, like the grass as a food, is good and can make them like full. Uh, but so so they cannot find anything else. So they use that as times goes on, and they become the vegetarian. So they just use the grasses, you're right? So now they find the new food habit. So that's the kind of also evolution. So then the bacteria in the gut needs to be evolved, and maybe the gene is going to be evolved, and those inherited, if they are good, if they are produced to kids, so they are going to be passed on to the next generation. So now let's talk about a little bit of dietary fiber and the reason why do we need to have the fibers. So fiber, also known as the roughage, is the indigestible part of the plant foods that travels through our digestive system, absorbing water along the way and easing the bowel movement. So dietary fiber refers to the nutrients in the diet that are not digested by gastrointestinal enzyme, but still fulfill an important role. Mostly found in vegetable, fruits, whole grain, and legumes, fiber has a host of the health benefits, including reducing the risk of the heart disease and diabetes. In this article, we will look at the different types of the fiber, why they are important, and what foods contain a high level of the fiber. And let's talk about the fast fact on the fiber. So here are some key points about the fiber. More detail and supporting information is in the main article. So fiber is often split into types. Either they are soluble or they are insoluble. Dairy products and the white bread have a little to no fiber. Cereal, grains, seeds, vegetables, and fruits are a good source of the fiber. Fiber helps speed up the elimination of the toxic waste through the colon. Oats, cereal, Brussels sprouts, oranges, flax seeds, and beans such as the kidney black and the pinto are good source of the soluble fiber. Okay, so the benefit is protection against the heart disease. So fiber is useful for the gut, but it's very interesting to know it prevents the heart diseases. According to the University of the Maryland Medical Center, the consumption of the soluble fiber has been shown to protect against the heart disease by reducing cholesterol levels. So gastrointestinal health, the consumption of the fiber promotes the regular bowel movement and prevents constipation. It may also reduce the risk of developing colitis and hemorrhoids. There is also mixed evidence that consuming fiber might help reduce the risk of the colon cancer. Okay. So then we have a diabetes. People with diabetes who consume a lot of fiber tend to need less insulin than those whose fiber intake is low. Fiber can help slow the absorption of sugar, helping to prevent spikes after meal. And the body weight. A high fiber intake can significantly contribute toward the body weight. Body weight control. Fiber produces a feeling of the fullness without adding calories, right? So fiber calories are not absorbed by the body. This can help treat or prevent overweight, obesity. So most foods that are high in fiber are also very healthy for other reasons. Take for example fruit, vegetable, and whole grain. They are high in fiber but also rich in vitamins and other essential nutrients. In other words, eating a high fiber diet protects the health through both the intake of the fiber and other essential nutrients. So we don't want to go so deep into the fibers, but now we know why they are important, so that's, I think, is enough. So let's talk about the Charles Darwin, right? There are lots of the thing about the Charles Darwin. So Charles Darwin, it proposed evolution, of course, by natural selection. So that's important to note, the natural selection by Charles Darwin. Right, so he published on the origin of the species, 1859, and he said the mental continuity between humans and animals, and why. So mental continuity between animals and humans. So mental continuity between animals and humans. So let's say, what is the mental continuity? Mental continuity psychological continuity consists of the holding of the number of the psychological relation between the person stages or relation hold between when the beliefs and desire produce through reasoning new beliefs, desire, intention, or decision, as well as the holding of. Not really, but Darwin on the mental continuity, because he says that there's a mental continuity between the animals and humans. And so 1859, he published a book called On the Origin of the Species, and he explained on his book the evolution happens by the natural selection, right? So they are evolving by the natural selection. So those individuals who have the traits that fit them better in the environment, they have the higher chances to live the offspring of their own self, right? Their selves. So let's look at the Darwin on mental continuity, right? So natural selection, because it says some traits are more optimal, so progeny and will pass to the next generation. So that's called the evolution, right? So and right. So mental continuity between humans and animals. So let's see what is mental continuity. Darwin on mental continuity. The summary appears at the end of the Darwin's 2 chapter in Descent of the Man, right? So Descent of the Man on the mental life and mental evolution of the animal. So Darwin wrote 2 books, right? So The Origin of the Species, which basically we heard a lot. So it talks about like the natural selection and all of those stuff. But we have a Descent of the Man. And Descent of the Man basically is talking about the mental continuity exists between the humans and animals. So 1871 it published. It said, nevertheless, the difference in mind between man and the higher animals, great as it is, certainly is one of the degree and not of the kind. So what does it mean? So nevertheless, the difference in mind between man and higher animals, great as it is, certainly is one of degree and not of kind. So when we say degree, so difference in degree, it's qualitative, right? Or we can search what is like qualitative. So qualitative means non-numerical, right? So degree so you can say degree is qualitative or quantitative. Degree is qualitative. So it says that degree is qualitative. So degree is qualitative and kind is quantitative, right? So kind is quantitative. So it's saying nevertheless, the difference in mind between man and higher animals, great as it is, certainly is one of degree and not of the kind. I think in this example, when we say is certainly is one of the degree, right? So because it says certainly is one of the degree, so it means that is degree means qualitative because it's observed, right? And the one of the kind is quantitative. And why we mean that, right? So what does it mean? So because it says nevertheless, the difference in the mind between the man and the higher animals, great as it is, certainly is one of degree and not the kind. Because it says that it's really explaining everything. It explains that the brain is much complex, that we can study it and just recognize and point out the important points in the brain to the people to say that which part of the brain is most important and which part causes evolution. So we cannot say that still from the 1871. So he said it's a qualitative. So because we can say it's a qualitative because we can just conclude this decision by looking at the differences, by looking at the difference in the behavior. So humans, we know that we have the decision making power or the free will, but do animals have those power like the ego, superego? No, they do not. So we can say it is a qualitative degree. So it's a qualitative measurement. So because it's a grade, as it certainly is one of the degree and not of the kind. So, and it's called the descent of the man, right? So that means that also I was going to talk about the mental continuity because it's a between. So it says here mental continuity between humans and animals, but it doesn't say is it similar, is it different, or what is that? So I can just read this. So Charles Darwin on the mental continuity of humans and animals. So this summary appears at the end of the Darwin's 2 chapters in Descent of the Man, 1871, on the mental life and the mental evolution of animals. There can be no doubt that the difference between the mind of the lowest man and that of the highest animal is immense. An anthropomorphous ape, if we could take a dispassionate view of his own case, would admit that though he could form an artful plan to plunder a garden, though he could use a stone for fighting or for breaking open nuts, yet that the thought of fashioning a stone into a tool was quite beyond his scope. Still less, as he would admit, could he follow out a trained metaphysical reasoning or solve a mathematical problem or reflect on God or admire a grand natural scenes, right? So the ape couldn't do that, could not cook, right? So the apes are unable. So some apes, however, would probably declare that they could and did admire the beauty of the colored skin and fear of their partner in a marriage. They would admit that they could make other apes understand by cry some of their perception and simpler ones. The notion risks their lives for them. and to take charge of their orphans. But they would be forced to acknowledge that disinterested love for all living creatures, the most noble attributes of the man, was quiet beyond their comprehension. So, nevertheless, the difference in the mind between man and the higher animal, great as it certainly is, one of the degree and not of the kind. We have seen that the senses and intuitions, the various emotion and faculties, such as love, memory, attention, curiosity, imitation, reason, extra of which man boasts, may be found in an incipient or even sometimes in a well-developed condition in the lower animal. They are also capable of some inherited improvement, as we see in the domestic dog compared with the wolf or the jackal. If it could be proved that certain high mental powers, such as the formation of the general concepts, self consciousness, etc., were absolutely peculiar to man, which seems extremely doubtful. It is not improbable that these qualities are merely the incidental result of the highly advanced intellectual facilities, and these again mainly the result of the continued use of the perfect language. At what age does the newborn infant possess the power of abstraction, or become self-conscious and reflect on its own existence? So we say the simplest behavior is the self-conscious and the reflect of own behavior. That's really important, right? So we cannot answer, nor can we answer in regard to ascending organic skill. The half art, half instinct of the language will burst the stem of gradual evolution. The ennobling belief in a God is not universal with man, and the belief in a spiritual agency naturally follows from other mental powers. The moral sense perhaps offers the best, highest moral contribution, which the aid of the active intellectual powers and the acts of the habit, naturally to the golden rules, as ye would that man should do to you, do ye to them likewise, and this lies at the foundation of morality. In the next chapter, I shall make some few remarks on the probable steps and the means by which the several mental and moral faculties of the man have been gradually evolved. That such evolution is at least possible of not to be denied, for we see these faculties developing in every infant, and we may trace a perfect gradation from the mind of an other idiot lower than that of an animal low in scale to the mind of the Newton. Okay, so we talked about all of this. So like intelligence, perception, stimulus control, space and time, classical conditioning, operant conditioning, complex behavior, and everything, right? So we have the Darwin and saying that. So let's talking about the comparative analysis of behavior. So psychology is the study of behavior. Do you believe that or not? I particularly don't think that psychology is only the study of the behavior. Psychology is the study of mind and behavior, not particularly behavior, but how does the mind work. Psychology is multi-faceted discipline and includes many subfields of study, such as the areas of human development. We have sports, health, clinical, social behavior, and cognitive process. So psychology is study of the mind and behavior, I would say. Psychology is the study of mind and behavior. How behavior is produced by physiological mechanism. Behavior is produced by physiological mechanism. So behaviors is produced by physiological mechanism or factors, changes. Physiological psychology is studies many relating topics to the body's response to a behavior or the activity in an organism. It uses electrical and chemical signals to send responses to different parts of the body. It made up the nerve cells called neurons. So we study mind and behavior, and we know that behavior is a result of physiological mechanism or the factors. So physiological psychology is a subdivision of behavioral neuroscience. Biological psychology that studies the neural mechanism of perception and behavior through direct manipulation of the brain of non-human animals, subjects in controlled experiments. This field of psychology takes an empirical and practical approach when studying the brain and the human behavior. Most scientists in this field believe that the mind is a phenomenon that stems from the nervous system. By studying and gaining knowledge about the mechanism of the nervous system, physiological psychologists can uncover many truths about the human behavior. Unlike other subdivisions with biological psychology, the main focus of physiological research is the development of theories that describe the brain-behavior relationship. So we have the physiological psychology, explains the brain behavior. Right. Physiological psychology studies many topics relating to the body's response to a behavior activity in an organism. It considers the brain cells, structure, component, and chemical interaction that are involved in order to produce actions. Psychologists in this field usually focus their attention to topics such as sleep, emotion, ingestion, senses, reproductive behavior, learning, memory, communication, pharmacology, neurological disorders. The basis of these studies all surround themselves around the notion of how the nervous system intervenes with other systems in the body to create a specific behavior. So we talk about that, and so these mechanisms have been selected by the past environment. So if I do some behavior today, so they are all selected by the past environment. And make sure that you know that we said behavior is produced by the physiological mechanism, and the mechanism have been selected by the past environment. Therefore, evolution by natural selection explains the continuity and diversity in behavior among the species. So evolution by natural selection explains the continuity and diversity in behavior among a species. This led Darwin to the comparative analysis of behavior. Darwin comparative analysis of behavior allows science to use animal models to study human behavior. I really don't like this part because it says it lets the science to use the animal models to just stimulate or study the human behavior, because many of the mechanism of the behavior are shared. Still, they're shared, but they're not the same, because it says they use the animal model because many of the mechanism of the behavior are shared among the wide range of species. So, for example, what cognitive level is necessary for the special behavior, right? That's a good thing. So, what cognitive level is required for a special behavior? Right? So, behavior, we say, is produced by physiological mechanism. These mechanisms are selected by the past environment. Therefore, evolution by natural selection by Darwin can explain the continuity and the diversity in the behavior in any species or among any species. And we said the science led us to use the animal models to just study the human behavior because they shared because this mechanism shares are shared among the wide range of species. So let's talk about the comparative analysis of behavior, which Darwin started to work at. So we talk about the principle of learning, memory, and cognition in rats. Pigeons, humans, honeybees seem to operate via shared mechanism process, right? So shared. So when we say comparative analysis, shared mechanism and process. Okay. Thus, studying behavioral mechanism across many species can inform us about the human psychology and its neural and genetic basis, right? So that's important. Thus, studying the behavioral mechanism across many species, like the pigeons, like the honeybees, or the humans, right? So study of the behavioral mechanism across the many species inform us about human psychology and its neural and genetic basis. So we say the studying behavior across the many species inform us about the human psychology and its neural and genetic basis. So how we know, so that's very important. So how, because many people think that we discovered from the genetic by itself, but actually we discovered from the genetic, like by studying the human psychology, right? By learning more about the humans, right? So comparative psychology involves the uses of the comparative methods. So comparative psychology involves the use of the comparative methods in which similar studies are carried out to on the animal of the different species. So comparative psychology involves the use of comparative method in which similar studies are carried out on animals of different species. So comparative psychology. So the comparative psychology involves the use of the comparative method. So involves the use of the comparative method in which the similar studies are carried out on animals of the different species. So in which a similar study are carried out on the animals of the different species. Similarity and differences in the behavioral process. So similarity and similarities and differences in behavioral process. Origin and evolutionary development of the behavior process. So we have similarity and difference in a behavior process, and we have origin and evolutionary development of a behavioral process. So let's talk about the deep homology. So that's important. So we says what is the goal of the comparative psychology? First is to find similarity and differences in the behavioral process, and then we can say is the origin of the development and behavioral process. So the comparative psychology, it does two main things. So the first thing, it's find the similarity and differences in the behavioral process. So similarity and differences in the behavioral process. And second is the origin and evolutionary development of the behavioral process, right? So evolutionary and development of the behavioral process. So that's a comparative, like the psychology that is comparative method let us to know the neural and the genetic basis for the animals and all of those things. And comparative psychology involves the use of the comparative method in which the similar studies are carried out on animals of different species. Similarity and differences in the behavioral process. Okay, let me say origin and evolutionary development of the behavioral process. So deep homology of behavior, genetic and molecular mechanism for circadian clocks share invertebrates, insect plants, fungi, bacteria. So circadian rhythm. So the genetic and molecular mechanism for circadian clocks are shared in vertebrates, insects, plants, fungi, and bacteria. Genetics and neurotransmitter mechanism for exploratory behavior shared between the honeybees and humans. So neurotransmitter, so genetic and molecular mechanism for circadian rhythm is basically shared between all groups, such as we say vertebrates, insects, plants, and fungi, bacteria. Genetic and neurotransmitter, genetic and neurotransmitter are shared for exploratory behavior, shared between honeybees and humans. And genes involved in anxiety play the similar role in fruit flies, mice, and humans. So genes involved in an anxiety. So genes involved in an anxiety play similar role in fruit flies, mice, and humans. Some cell molecular mechanism of learning found in mollusks and vertebrate. Some cell molecular mechanism. Some cell molecular mechanism of learning found in mollusks and vertebrates. So some cell molecular mechanism of the learning found in mollusks and vertebrates. So dual visual reflex in a sea slug aplasia. And we have a siphon, like the mantle shelf, goal, and anxiety. We can talk about how an anxiety cause genes to evolve. So effect of an anxiety, basically school just creates a lot of anxiety. So then we have a George Romance, Darwin's intellectual here. Animal intelligence. So George Romance, it talked about, so George Romance talk about animals intellectual or intelligence. 1882. Relied heavily on anecdotes to build his uncritical view of the animal intelligence. So George's Romance, it's basically relied on anecdotal to just say his story and how or what caused the evolution, right? So basically we say anecdotes, right? So anecdote involving Romance, a coachman's cat. So let's say, walking up to the door with the most matter or coarse kind of air. She used to spring at the half-hoop handle just below the top latch. Holding on the bottom of this half-hoop with one forepaw, she then raised the other to thump the piece and while depressing the latter. Finally, with her legs, scratch and push the door post so as to open the door. Of course, in all such cases, the cat must have previously observed that the doors are opened by persons placing their hands upon the handles, and having observed this, the animals forthwith the act by what may be strictly termed traditional imitation. First, the animal must have observed that the door is opened by the hand grasping the handle and moving the latch. Next, she must reason by the logic of the feelings if the hand can do it. Why not the paw? I don't think that animals have the logic fully. We can see, do like animals have the logical fully? See, are animals capable of emotion? Do non-human animals such as cats, dogs, and chimpanzee have emotion like happiness, sadness, fear, and anger? There is no doubt that such animals can be rewarded and treated, but their behavior is no guarantee that they experience the emotion that people have. So then we have the Morgan and the Thorndike. So the Morgan canon, it says, if no case may we interpret an action as the outcome of the exercise of the higher mental faculty, if it can be interpreted as the outcome of the one which stands lower in the psychological scale. I didn't get what he says. So we said Morgan canon, it says, in no case may we interpret an action as the outcome of the exercise of a higher mental faculty. So action as the outcome of the exercise of a higher mental faculty. If it can be interpreted as the outcome of one which stands lower in the psychological scale,